the other session will start a little later, quarter of an hour. So if they want, they will join us later. Tiago was supposed to moderate this session, but he's moderating the other one because Monica had another appointment. So we are a bit overbooked with work these days. So we'll start this session with a presentation by Frédéric, Vidal and Luísa Veloso about the electric car in Portugal.
So, this communication aims to offer an overview of a social history study on electric car and electric mobility research project in Portugal. And this analysis is a part of a wider ongoing research, it's SDI, on innovation networks and social, political and economic configuration in line with science and technology studies, sociology of innovation and sociology of the market. And this research is mostly based on actor network theories, means that the construction process of knowledge is situated in specific social, universe and cultural situation. And our object here with the electric mobility project is the research project trajectories, and that are seen as a social process of mutual dependencies, and they are flexible and variable in their definition and organization according to time and space. And we think that project trajectory could be an outlook to scrutinize the social dimension of R&D activities. They help to stress the collective organization form and the diversity of social actors involved in these activities. And it's why electric mobility could be a good case study. And this is a project of a global scope with multiple ramifications and consequences mainly in the configuration of urban space and urban mobility. So our approach is based on the content analysis of discourses on electric car project, and we made a literature review focusing on the history of electric car, media coverage, and which is focusing on the publication of 2 voluntary associations in Portugal, and we also interviewed the set of actors involved in the research and the industrial project on electric mobility in Portugal. We compare these different discourses. And our studies is focused on the reception, the use and representation of the innovation process. A few words just to present our case study. Our case study is the Mobilier project. This project was a public policy program aiming to create a loading network of electric vehicle batteries. In Portugal, first studies were carried out between 2008 and 2009, and these studies were developed by a working group that included 3 companies with distinct responsibilities. And in 2009, this working group gave rise to a consortium led by a state-owned company, and in addition to these key partners, the consortium network also includes a center of innovation in this field and a subcontracted company responsible for specific aspects of the electric mobility project, design, part of the batteries, the loading system, etc. And to develop the project, the Portuguese government also signed a protocol with 26 municipalities aiming at implementing a pilot project. And Mobilier project aimed at structuring a network of electric mobility at the national level and creating an open market to operators and traders. And Portugal was a pioneer in the work with this project. And the consortium was dismantled in 2011, but Mobilier, as an operational concept, extends itself to the present day with several projects of national and international European scope. In America and Europe, research on electric car and electric mobility exists since the mid-19th century. Historians have mainly focused on the early years of the car industry, or the late 19th century. This is a period in which car industry network was building up. And the beginning of car industry, electric car was seen as a good alternative to gasoline car. In fact, the kind of golden age of electric car that dominates the market until the beginning of the 20th century. And I'm not describing here a monolithic and constant research field. It's possible to identify a wide range of projects and experiences centered on different objects of research and goals. And research projects on namely electric car, electric mobility, or electric engine are sharing technological tools, but could be very different in their conception and organization and the way they construct their network of actors. Furthermore, electric car and electric mobility have been a fascinating case study for the social study of science and a significant object of theoretical debate. For example, Michel Calon used the case of the electric vehicle and more precisely research program of the French EDF in the 1970s to illustrate his actual theory. And we can stress some features of this research field that can explain the interest of social studies of science. So the question is, what killed the electric car at the early 20th century? This is the main question of the historical research. To summarize, we can stress three different kinds of interpretation of the electric car failure at the beginning of the car industry, presented mainly in this book and Schiffer's book. First of all, the vested interest theory that has stressed the action of powerful corporation against a new product. Secondly, the technological theories that has stressed the inferior technology of the electric car, namely in comparison with gasoline car. And finally, the consumerist theory, that with the idea that consumers determine the product's destiny. In the literature, there are two approaches of the technological issues. The first one is centered on the object, per se, its technical performances and its capacity to respond to the consumer needs. For example, the electric car technology has to respond to the desire for autonomy and independence in travel and daily mobility. And it was a major trend in the American and European society and European cities of the late 19th century. The second approach of the technological issue is centered on the social and technological network in which the R&D projects are conducted. Electric mobility is in the convergence of two main networks, the electric car network and car industry network, that are both under development at the end of the 19th century, and with interdependent relations and conflicts of representation and interest. But electric car has been mostly seen as an object of symbolic conception, and specific attention has been given to cultural phenomena that have shaped the reception and use of this technology. And at the turn of the 19th century, and in comparison with gasoline cars, the technical problem faced by the electric car engine, i.e. performance and the velocity, the safety and the fear of electricity, and the autonomy, the capacity of storage, battery, and loading and factory. And in the late 19th century, the perception of these performances and capacity is shaped by the cultural meaning of the car. Electric car could contribute to the makeover of urban mobility, and these cars were easier to drive. Some contemporary also from the 19th century note that they were quieter, cleaner, and odor-free in comparison to gasoline car. But another model, one linked to the practice of sport, for example, leisure or tourism. And the speed and autonomy of the car then became key criteria in the choice of consumers. An important issue has been less examined, and the role of public actions and policies. The autonomy in industry or automotive industry has been affected by law and regulation, and these policies are transnational, and they are at the junction between CNT policies and industrial policies. And since the beginning of the 20th century, voluntary association and unions had a great importance in this field, and to establish, for example, traffic regulation and safety standards in the 1920s, or to implement an environmental agenda in the 1970s. And the harmonization of automobile standards means transfer of technology knowledge and know-how, and it can influence selection process of the partnership in the network, or the definition of the objective of the project, for example, with the need to develop products that comply new international technical standards, for the plug, battery, loading, infrastructure, etc. Our Portuguese case study seems to confirm part of this global interpretation of the history of the electric car. The Mobility project faced various difficulties of continuity associated not only with the crisis of the last 4 years, economic crisis of the last 4 years, but also with other aspects that show the existence of disparities between the public policy objectives and the social views. Among the various aspects mentioned by the interviewees, we can stress the lack of consumer knowledge about the electric vehicle and the possibility of the buying it, the requirement of the electrical installation at home and the fear of fire, for example, and the autonomy of the electric vehicle battery, and also the high price in comparative terms of the vehicle, electric vehicle. But on the other hand, actors involved in the Mobilier project have produced different image and perception about R&D project, and our analysis now is led us to distinguish 3 different perceptions, and we are working on it. Mobilier project is seen as a network of projects, or in other words, as a set of projects of R&D, more or less linked together in simultaneous or consecutive ways. And the set of or network is involving different entities and companies, research laboratories, public institutions that have different levels of participation. And in this case, it is interesting, network is a kind of amic or native category that is used by the actor to describe and justify the viability and flexibility of the relation between the different entities and partnerships. Mobility is also described as a ladder, and that allows social actors to communicate on priority action for public sector. And in this case, social actors are setting up crucial links between Mobility project and public policies at governmental level. And finally, Mobility project is seen as a form of public action that is integrating industrial policies, policies of CNT, or spatial planning. And it's developing new connections between private and public sectors, creating a private network for public use. And it is interesting to underline that these perceptions are territory based according to scale perception, and different features are stressed. For example, at national and transnational level, Mobility project is seen as a crucial issue for CNT policies and industrial policies. And at regional level, Mobility project is perceived as a social network and based on personal ties between researchers and companies, for example, or also personal, individual personal itineraries. And finally, at municipal level, municipal level is a specific step to conceive the technical and social definition of the project, which is then seen as a technical network set up in urban space. So, to conclude, in which situation our process actor, social actor, identifies innovation. The innovation for electric car, electric mobility technology is somehow restricted according to the actors involved in this project. It depends, obviously, depending on the position and past of these actors. Innovation is identified in the construction of social technical networks, as articulation between local, regional, and national and transnational scales, European scales, or transnational scales. The access to technology, the distribution of the technology through urban space. And it is also identified as the capacity of putting the project in the market, and to achieve this goal, research and engineers have to invent new business model and define what the market of electric mobility and information system for electric mobility should be or could be, namely from the perspective of the cultural, economic, and background scopes. Thank you.
Questions?
And Luísa is here with so she can answer also to.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. Actually, I worked on hydrogen, and one of our conclusions was that in order to have hydrogen cars on the roads, we need infrastructure. So, for electric vehicles, a couple of years later, someone did some research and got the same result. So you need infrastructure. Portugal put the infrastructure. There are also other factors that actually influence the government to pay infrastructure. And you may remember that a key factor was when Nissan decided to, or Renault Nissan decided to build this batteries industry in the north of Portugal, in the Aveiro region, right? Afterwards, with this agreement with Renault Nissan Socrates, the Prime Minister at that point actually kicked off the project with Mobi. But my question is, do you feel that the investment in infrastructure was a good investment that probably in the future we will see the benefits, or was it a failure?
I don't know, I think it's not my work. I can't answer. I don't know, it's not my position. I think for people who interview, it was not a good investment. It was very bad, because they don't policies and political governance approach, and all the projects of the government was more about communication, about to make good internet site, this kind of thing, and think about policies in the long term. So the perception of the actors that it was a failure of this project. I don't know if
well, you have both sides when you speak with the social actors. Some of them really say what Frédéric is telling. For instance, people from universities, some of them that we interviewed are a bit mad also with the industry because they want to call for projects. So there's also an institutional part of this. But in other interesting issue is that when you start interviewing people, the links never end. So actually what's happening now is that Mobi is a project, it has a political framework, very strong one, but then afterwards there are lots of other projects that are going on, and they're not national anymore. So the three companies that were involved, each one of them has projects. Some of them are in consortium, other ones are international with other international companies. So it's not up to us as researchers to say if it was a good investment or not. But the failure is always a good discussion. That's why the perspective from Frédéric is very important, because it gives you a historical view of it. But if you look at the interviews that we did very recently, there are other projects that are being done, always also included in European politics. They do think and they do believe that electric mobility has to be the future. Actually, you find in lots of documents that we're analyzing. So it's not a question for them if it will be or not. It has to be. So for instance, the Mobi Europe, for instance, another project that is going on. So what they are doing, for instance, in several of these failures, if you can call it, the problem with the autonomy, they are doing hybrids. The problem with the battery, they are doing low, medium and long-term batteries. For instance, Renault has already a system that you can buy the electric car and they can loan you the battery. When it doesn't work, they give another one. So there are lots of firms that are working on this. So it's like a never-ending story, I think. But it is a name from the European Union, actually.
I just want to say that I don't support neither if it was a failure or not. It's just a question.
I know. Yeah, but neither do us. Do we, sorry.
More questions? Did you interview the companies that were involved in the technology development?
Yeah. All of them.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. All inclusions of it.
And they said to you that it was not a technological innovation?
Yeah. Because what they say is that the technology exists, they are doing improvements on the technology. It's like it's really connected to smart grids also, that's going on.
Even the business plan?
Not in business, technological speaking.
Yeah, but the business plan is kind of...
No, the business plan is different. That you have more innovation, but when you speak about putting the product in the market, you have innovation. Technological speaking, they don't think it's really a huge innovation. Well, but the universities don't think the same way. It all depends with whom you're speaking.
More questions? Can I have one? Did you interview users, people who have bought electric cars?
No, we have a media program, so it's certification, it's kind of a session of user, and we want to analyze the process. But we don't have the interview of users, but there are few.
300 and something. Anything else? Thank you, Frédéric. Then we will now move on to Petter Johansen Jens Røyrvik.
Well, as you said, my name is Jens Røyrvik, and this is my colleague Jens Johansen. It's two people, but one name, it's easy to remember. We are from NTNU Social Research. It's a research institute that is owned by the University of Trondheim. This is an institute that often operates between the university and industry or external places. Our presentation will be about one or two projects within energy efficiency that we have. And energy efficiency, that is kind of that's one of many areas that we do research. Our main focus, or the part of research that I am focused on, is standardization, the phenomenon of standardization or objectification or entification, these kind of phenomena. And this is from one of our bigger projects. It's how work is standardized as risk entities, how it's translated from work until entities of risk. And by processes of quantification and by digital infrastructure. And the work we are presenting today is kind of discussed similarly in our research. It's how houses and systems and production processes are brought into a world of calculation in order to be controlled and manipulated. But at the same time, we find, and Jens Petter will show better, tool users trying to create new system and to change infrastructure. As we know, infrastructure is one of the most important stabilizing elements in our society. And creating the project this research has been conducted through is a very, it's a big technically oriented project. It's, I think it's something like 6.5 million euros budget, and then of course focused on developing technical solutions. And our role and kind of my responsibility has been the social science part of it. But when we started, we had this strange position nowhere really. Kind of innovation of my program, so I shouldn't stand too much. But innovation as our focus, and our responsibility was to kind of make innovation happen in some way, magic dust of bringing things, and then it should come about, which is, of course, is impossible. So what we did was do a STS grounded project. In this case, it's about utilization of thermal energy in industrial sites. And the point of the project for that study is that it exists a lot of technical solutions, good functioning technical solutions, and it's been proven by economists that it's profitable, but it's few initiatives and fewer successful initiatives still, and so we were told to kind of find out why. And Jens Petter will tell you why.
Yeah, you can switch the slide. I think I'll start up. So kind of our task is that there are still few initiatives. Why? And what is interesting in Norway is that most of the research is focused on why not. And there is, because as I said, technical solutions exist regarding utilizing surplus heat from one industry company to another or to houses. And in many cases, these are also profitable. This is the dominating model for explaining this. It's the Norwegian Agency for Energy Efficiency that has made it. It's all in Norwegian, so you won't understand it. It's quite understandable. What they have done is that they've made an assessment of the total potential for utilizing surplus heat from industrial sites, and they mentioned some barriers that are stopping this potential from being realized. For example, lack of infrastructure, lack of capital, also competence and knowledge is also listed as a barrier, which I find somewhat interesting. So this model is really based on economically rational logic that if these barriers are removed, more and more of the potential are released, which of course is problematic. So we wanted to turn around the question. Instead of looking at why are so many initiatives not being, so much potential not being released, study one case study and see how have they actually made it happen. So we were presented with a case that is regarded as a success. We got this model from one of our technical partners in the Creative project, which shows a model for an energy system in an industrial cluster in Norway. I can explain a bit. What we have here is Norway's largest dairy. They make milk products such as milk, etc. And they also produce a lot of surplus heat and CO2. What we have here is the dairy's energy central, which is the locus point of this whole system, that among other are transporting heat from the dairy up here to Norway's largest greenhouse. They make like paprika, tomatoes, vegetables. I think greenhouse is the proper translation, maybe gardenery, I'm not sure. Greenhouse, yeah. So they receive the heat from TINA. They also receive TINA's whole CO2 output to go into the photosynthesis of the greenhouse and transport their low temperature heat back here. We also have 3 more companies connected to these systems that receive district cooling from the dairy and gives back low temperature surplus heat to make the whole system more efficient. This is regarded as a really big success in Norway. They have a lot of good solutions. They also have ground heat storage to take care of asymmetries between supply and demand within the system. And by connecting it this way, they are also creating a lot more heat than they actually need, so that they can sell it to a district heating company that are to a local town. So this is regarded as a success, but also a static picture of the system. It's how the system is now. We want to see how they actually made it. So this is a picture of the actual cluster with the dairy, we have the greenhouse, and we have 3 companies that produce meat. I forgot to say that. And as you can also see from this picture, is that it's in the outskirts of Norway, there's nothing around it. It's a really small region with close ties between the companies and the municipality. And to understand how this energy system was created, we must actually look at the construction of the industrial cluster itself. Because originally it was only these 3 buildings, the meat producers, that were present in this cluster. And the energy system came to being when the dairy and the greenhouse decided at the same time that they wanted to join the cluster and be integrated in a completely full way. So to understand how this is built, we have to look at the construction of the cluster. And these are really big facilities in Norwegian standard. So it was a lot of back and forth. They had to be proved that they were really energy efficient to be allowed to get such huge sites. And yeah, you can change picture. And during our interview, we found out every informant actually pointed at one guy that has been the main driving force in both making the dairy as efficient as possible and also the connection between these 2 companies. And what is striking that there is a small group of people that are really interested in every single component. Change the view. That every component must be as efficient as possible, the interaction between components must be as efficient as possible, and also calculating the effect of these components must be as efficient as possible. And they have got research help from research institutions, and he is arguing that he has planned this in detail for 20 years. So this is a long process. If we go to the next picture. But making the companies as efficient as possible in themselves is not enough to create these systems, especially the connection between these 2 are interesting. Because the greenhouse is fully dependent on the dairy to work. Their core production is tied up to this company's energy central. So, and this is a long story of how they found together. It was this guy and the boss of this company that met at the conference, just like this, and started pinching IDs. And after several years with negotiations with the local municipality and getting the licenses, etc. Another issue is the land. They have to lie really close to each other because you lose so much potency of the heat if they're lying far away. And actually the local mayor came and negotiated with the farmers to make them established so close. So it's been a huge process explaining the construction of the cluster and thereby also the construction of the energy system. And if we appreciate. And what is interesting is that they are so dependent on each other. One example of that is when the greenhouse was finished building in 2010. The dairy was actually too late, so their energy central wasn't finished. And their core production is dependent on their own energy centrals, they're dependent on help from others. So what happened is that the third company that lies next to the greenhouse helped out with surplus heat, with CO2 to get the production started. And thereby another company was connected to the energy system, which made the idea that more companies could become connected. If we get the next slide. So it's a real peculiar how this internal system in the cluster was made. It's been a really small group of persons. They have been really dedicated, as they're saying explicitly that they want to keep the economists away within their own company. They don't want to ruin the good collaboration they have going. One of the companies are almost not making money out of it, but they say as long as it's black numbers, as long as we're not losing money, we want to do it because we want to make the most efficient system as possible. So within here they can actually do whatever they want with the system, and it's a lot of things they have to do, like deciding the regulation within here, who are owning the infrastructure, who are going to operate the infrastructure, what the price is going to be between these partners, etc. And since they're making so much surplus heat, they can also sell it to the local district heating company, which also have been, this is a really small region, so they know each other, and which has made this a lot easier. So for the sake of this presentation, it's two arguments we can take out of this. How this complex process of constructing the cluster, all the people, components, etc., it cannot be reduced to a barrier perspective on how these things are coming into being. And the contextual bit is important. Yeah, change. The other thing we can take out of it is that it's not merely physical connections when industrial companies decide to share energy. We're also creating a socio-technical system that has consequences for each company, which can be illustrated by this is a traditional energy system. You have a producer, you have a distributor, you have a grid owner that owns the net, and you have a receiver. So when you put your cell phone charger in the wall, you don't doubt that there's coming electricity out, at least not in Norway. We have a lot of electricity. But when you're creating this kind of system, the companies that are, their main concern is producing milk. Their main concern is to produce tomatoes. But they're also becoming producers, distributors, grid owners, and receivers within the network. And this has a lot of several consequences because they become dependent on each other. They have to negotiate roles like rights to energy, operating rules, etc. And it also is an issue about trust. In this case, you have like an institutional kind of trust that you trust that they have manifested roles and you trust that electricity is coming out. Here you actually have to trust that the company is going to stay there for 20 more years. It's a lot of investments, and what we argue in actually this case is that the collective foundation of this small group with so close social ties, etc., has made this process a lot more easier. Okay, I think I've talked a lot.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And then just for the project, we started out to find out why these idiots weren't doing this a lot more. And what we found out was that it was really unique that they made it happen. So it's kind of that was interesting, both the technical research and also the industry. And this project now, it's over, this creative, but we started, it's another project going on that is so fresh that we have no logo, I guess we take the reference. Which is more of a, it's a lot of the same partners, but it's more of a socio-technical project now, developing and trying a lot of the same things, but in different contexts than creative. So when creative try to find out about industrial interaction and the industrial cluster. Now it's kind of our project now is in Norway and also all over Europe to see trying to do the same kind of research in different contexts. This one is if we can take this one as an energy system, it's very different kind of consequences if it's in one building or if it's in one organizational unit. What kind of frame conditions and what kind of consequences for organizing and developing. If you compare that to what Jens Petter now just described. And also differences in what kind of processes that are integrated. If it's just warmth, or if it's core production. And we're also doing some case works on places where houses and industry are connected together, and what then happens if, like, industry gets shut down, and what about the distribution of heat or energy in those cases. It's also interesting to see in those cases that these collective infrastructures are connected to external ones. That is all issues of finance sector, of pricing and of competition. I don't think you mentioned that this cluster was, they came to the EFTA court because they tried to cheat on what's called regulated land, because it's the kind of the need to be plan ahead versus the need to neoliberalism. And also, of course, what kind of phase is in its planning or project or operational phase, it will be very different kind of issues to discuss. This was in a project phase we were looking at. So in the interact and creative projects, we see that, and it's been very interesting to see the STS both methods and way of doing research. It's contributed a lot to technical projects and to national kind of planning of how to make energy efficiency happen. But for us, it's also as important to see how energy efficiency is interesting cases of standardization and infrastructural change and stability. And we can see here about the meeting of kind of the world of calculation and the world of tool users, which is kind of the focus we always have when we study these things. And examples like the collective energy system. So I think that's the time we have.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I find it striking, first of all, thank you for a good presentation. I just find it striking that you mentioned that you don't seem to mention any reliance on formal policies in support of what these SMEs did together, and rather an informal connection with policymakers, local mayor. I don't know if that mentioned anyone else having been pivotal to its creation. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, let's talk about because when they're in the greenhouse, they had to be sure to have the land ready for them to plan ahead. If the greenhouse got the property but not the dairy, they would be really in trouble actually. So they had to get it ahead. And as this discussions we had with the local municipality and also the companies, we find that the municipality has to lay the property out for sale, open to everyone, but they can put in some, restrictions to which companies that are allowed to actually bid on the property, which was, in this case, that it has to be within the food industry, which, and also about energy efficiency as criteria, is that what it's called? Yeah.
What I can also say about this is, because your question is a big one actually, because when you say formal policy, it's so many things working one way and another way. Like it's a lot of incentives, and because they got economic, they got some money to do this because it's green, and it's because it's green, it's politically viable, so they got some the government were helping and so on. But at the same time, it's pollutionary standards and competition regulations and all these things, and it's working in every direction there is. And to map these regulative effects has been a very important part of this work. But why we kind of think this is fascinating to look at things happening on beneath the formal is that this has been invisible in these kind of projects before. It's kind of as long as the regulations are there, these systems will happen. That's kind of the general idea. So I want to show that it was 20 years of work for this one guy, and then he met these 3 other guys, and then they trusted each other and made the system happen.
Okay. But there were some more formal aspects.
Oh yeah.
Murray?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you'd considered any kind of historical comparisons. It sounds like the situation you're describing is so kind of far from like global engineering and more of how business should work today. It sounds more like some kind of something that brought to mind to me was like kind of 18th century industrial revolution with high tech. I mean, so it's very localized, it's sort of personal relations. I was just wondering, it might be some interesting comparisons. I mean, I don't know that stuff, but it sounds more like that than it does modern technology, obviously, which is cutting edge, but kind of relies on these small personal interactions.
Yeah. It's true, and that's also one thing that makes it a bit interesting, and also how it became such a success, I would say. We have other cases that it's not like that, and though it's a lot harder to get it functioning that good, because you needed, one of the criteria there was to get the core production of one company and the core production of another. That's not going to happen in a big city where you don't know each other. So what you see there is you see the walls, or if the nation state can say that, okay, if this will not work, we will provide. So it's different. That's what I was kind of finishing with this. This was one context. Yeah. Would the state provide any kind of? I mean, you mentioned how reliant they are on each other. But if one company collapsed, is that? I mean, do they ever talk about that? Is there any kind of parachute? Yeah, that's a part of the new project now. One way to answer it is to kind of have vulnerability analysis to say that, okay, how many of these heat producers would we need if one should go or two should go or another. But another way is that it's kind of regulated to have. You cannot have just this kind of energy infrastructure. You need to have another supportive one.
Yeah. And
this would be institutionalized in another way.
It seems to me that all these began with some friends that had the same vision, but several of that men that you showed in the discussion. Great. I would like to know if these kind of projects, the idea that you have, are more people-centered or people-determined, or more collective, and the main question in fact is this a normal way to work in Norway? Because that's more, some systems are culturally more cooperative than others, and I have this curiosity.
This is not the regular way of working in Norway either, I would say. It's actually at least a unique way of working. But I think what this example describes is that you can look at the regulations for themselves. They will answer some of the questions. You can look at the technology, but you must also look at the people. And in this case, it's been really essential.
This is why the grassroots innovation there.
And also about this, if it is typical, I would say that these people would say this is possible in this kind of municipality. It's not many people and everyone knows, so they go and ring the doorbell of the mayor if there's a trouble. And it's true actually, the mayor was shot, one of the farmers kind of chased the mayor out from his land because to get away, he didn't want to sell his land. So and he kind of and he went to another one and pressured them to get the land.
Yeah,
so this is the kind of
picture because they were doing this and then this and then this, and it was not very logical.
No, they should have it there. So this was the first place he was threatened. He was chased off the land actually. So this is a kind of commitment. And the reason is also, local policy. This is farming land. So what they do is produce food. And so the whole kind of, the reason why this was possible politically is that everything supported local policy of food products, and the cluster was all about food. And when the energy system came, it was stamped as green food production. And this is a part of the Norwegian kind of national policy to help these kind of municipalities to have cornerstone production.
Any more questions? Well, in that case, thank you very much. I'm afraid David Hapley and Jen Webb from the University of Edinburgh weren't able to make it to the conference, so we will move on to Nuno Bento Margarida Fontes talk about.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. First of all, I like to apologize for the fact that the title of my presentation is not exactly the same as it is presented in the program, but actually I figured that if I presented the title the other way around, it would be more clear for everybody. So, next few minutes I'm going to present about the development of wind energy, so its diffusion in a special way from the poor areas to the developed countries, and the way that actually it developed in Portugal and technological capabilities and legitimacy was formed. Okay, this is the outline. So, starting with the motivation and the objectives of this work. So, why wind in Portugal? Well, this morning actually Isabel Luísa talked about the role of wind, and actually it was a huge transformation in the last decade. So Portugal historically imports most of the energy and electricity, but actually in 2011, 45% of electricity was generated from renewable energy sources, of which actually wind came second. And this is very impressive, how wind could come in second place after only 10 years. And actually, more impressive is the fact that this around 20% of electricity share is actually the second highest share in the world, only surpassed by Denmark. At the same time, it was possible to build an industrial cluster around the construction of wind equipments. So, why to study? Why this type of studies? First of all, it's important to reveal patterns in terms of special diffusion of energy technologies. Then, we also want to search and identify mechanisms of technology transfer between the nations. Also, we wanted to understand the formation of local technological innovation systems, focusing on this case, in this particular case of wind in Portugal, in order to finally design better policies with a stronger empirical and theoretical basis in order to foster the diffusion of the next wave of new low carbon technologies. So this all boils down to this research question for today: how will wind power diffuse, especially what were the main drivers of its rapid diffusion in Portugal, and how was about technological capability and legitimacy for wind. So, a few words about our conceptual framework. So, I use two main streams of the literature, the literature on innovation. So, the first one is more theoretical, and the second one more empirical. The first one is from this very recent technological innovation systems literature, which actually explains the time required for the formation of a new innovation system based on a specific innovation in two terms. First of all, the creation of the structure, so establishment of the structure of this technological innovation system, which consists of actors, networks, and institutions. And secondly, in order to fulfill 7 key processes, here called functions of the innovation system, which are, for instance, creation of knowledge, experimentation, resource mobilization, legitimacy, and development of positive externalities. This on the one hand. On the other hand, we have more empirical literature that actually analyzed diffusion of energy technologies across the years. And actually this literature comes from traditional diffusion studies, and more recently they have studied the way technologies actually scaled in the past, and they came up with interesting patterns. So the first one is that actually technologies diffuse in a 3 stages sequential process of formative phase, upscaling, and growth phase. And secondly, apparently there is some evidence for diffusion acceleration when the innovation gets out from the core regions and goes and starts to diffuse in other regions in subsequent markets. So, okay, we saw the conceptual framework, what the theories are saying, and now we are going to analyze specifically the case of wind development in Portugal compared to the center. For the center, here we have the growth of installed capacity of wind in Portugal in green, and in compared to Denmark. And actually the dots are the actual data, and the lines the logistic phase. And what we see, and it's very interesting, is actually the lag, the diffusion lag between Portugal and Denmark is less than 10 years, which is very impressive in the case of the adoption of energy technologies in Portugal. So it's a very unique case, in terms of the technology. And the second main point I would like to draw your attention is for the fact that apparently there is an acceleration of growth in this fast forward country. So now we saw the growth in terms of installed capacity, pretty much what it is called here industry scaling. And now we are going to see what happened also at the unit scale, so the average unit of the wind turbines that were installed. This is the case in Denmark, and in Portugal and Denmark we see pretty much the 3 stages that I told a couple minutes before. So in the beginning, formative phase with lots of units being produced. In the second stage, actually there is an upscaling, important upscaling of the unit capacity, and then when the unit capacity is very large, there is a massive diffusion of very large technologies, which actually has a strong impact in the installed capacity. So from unit to total industry capacity. So we see clearly the case in the center for Denmark. And in Portugal, what happens is we don't see pretty much these three phases because everything happens very fast. So comparing the growth in Portugal and Denmark, the growth in Portugal is always much rapid. So there is a clear acceleration. But we are not just comparing in terms of capacity or in terms of unit capacity. We are also comparing in terms of how the growth happens for production, so in terms of outputs. So here, what we see, we compare in terms of gross electricity production of wind and in terms of share of wind in the electricity system. And the same, more clearly, we see that actually the growth is impressive. Okay. So clearly there is a special acceleration. Everything happened very fast. And now we wanted to know what made this happen so fast. And that's why we try to read the published articles and the media about the construction of this technological innovation system in Portugal. We also interviewed key actors, the regulator, and also some researchers that were involved. And we came across with our explanation about this fact and the mechanisms we find that are most important to explain this matter. So actually we see two different periods in the development of wind power in Portugal. First one is more related with the creation of the technological conditions to diffuse wind and to create also the legitimacy for wind. And a second period more related with institutional alignment, so with the incentives and the creation of those incentives, and then the market development. So starting with the formation of technology capability and legitimacy. So the development of wind power in Portugal was pretty much triggered by the science and technology policies at the EU level. So lots of researchers from national laboratories and also universities got involved in these international consortiums and stuff, and they actually had the access to important information and also created important knowledge in terms of physical mapping and wind profiles of the resource. So this was around the 80s and also the 90s. And this was very, very important. Why? And this was one of the conclusions we got from the interviews. It actually created local knowledge, it created technicians that were very important once actually the market started to develop very fast. And one of the indicators for that was the number of international consultants that were hired to help the diffusion of wind in Portugal, which was very, very low. At the same time, in the 80s, there was a couple of projects of experimentation of small wind turbines, namely in the islands, which actually allowed the first contact with technology and actually generated applied knowledge, which was very important for the first for the implementation of the first wind farm around 1997. Another major point in the formation of technological capability was, and the legitimacy, was the creation of the APREM, which is the Renewable Energy Producers Association, which actually, together with EDP, so the main historical income in Portugal, were very important for the implementation of the wind support scheme. So everything, all this, the good results from the experimentation and also the creation of the community of actors and networks worked in order to legitimate the wind power as an alternative or a real alternative for conventional technologies. And here in this graph, I just wanted to point out this comparison of the R&D budget in Denmark with Portugal, and I wanted to show the volatile character of R&D in Portugal, and also this very important period of late 80s and early 90s, when lots of there were lots of investment in this and creation of this knowledge in wind characterization. Okay, so we passed pretty much to the next level. Around the year 2000, what happened? Two main things happened at that point that actually changed everything. So the first one was the obligation imposed by the European directive, the so-called the Renewables Directive, which actually imposed to the member states to increase their renewable energy share. This on one hand. On the other hand, we have actually lots of improvements in the wind turbines in the centers of the core countries, which actually brought down the costs pretty dramatically, creating a window of opportunity to invest in wind. So here we can see the evolution of wind investments, of the investment cost in wind power, and around the year 2000 we are with costs ranging between 1.5 thousand to less than $2,000 per kilowatt, which is really good for an alternative to conventional technologies. So, against this context, actually, government set up ambitious targets and implemented a new feed-in tariff, which influenced the direction of search and actually the strategies, namely the strategy of the government, creating the conditions for the major growth that followed. So here, again, I'm presenting the evolution of cumulative installed capacity in the years in the new millennium, and also the annual additions. I would like to call your attention for two things. First thing is, after 2005, I will explain why in a minute, the annual additions were around 500 megawatts, which is really impressive. Second thing, I would draw your attention for this targets, ambitious targets, and in this particular year, 2003, actually, the target for 2010 was to build 3.75 thousand megawatts when actually the installed capacity was only 1/10 of that. So clearly the government boosted the expectations, and it created, the next slide I will show you, created also a very attractive regulation, and of course there were a lot of factors coming into the sector. So the regulation, just to point, in 2001 actually increased dramatically to an average of 8.5, and very importantly, with no limit for the price guarantee. One idea I would like to say for this is, like, of course, this regulation was revised afterwards, but actually lots of connections and lots of wind power that is producing right now is receiving actually this very generous feed-in tariff, which actually is one of the reasons why we have a huge deficit in tariffication. Okay, yesterday someone said that there is a feed-in debt. So in Portugal we have also this problem. This was in the context of Spain, of course, but in Portugal we have a similar problem. So the new feed-in tariff attract new actors, not just from the private financiers or the financial companies, but also engineering industries and electrical equipment companies, who actually brought not just capital but also knowledge and complementary knowledge. So in 2005, what happened was there were too much submissions or too much companies wanting to develop wind capacity that actually the government decided to organize public tenders. And one of the main requirements for these tenders was to increase the national incorporation of vehicles. And actually this requirement set the stage for the emergence of a cluster, industrial cluster afterwards. So the two main consortiums winning the public tender actually created factories of blades, towers and turbines together with main international manufacturers, so Enercon and Repower. In 2011 also, what happened was, in this very interesting and also should be noticed for the next generation of technologies, is this. There was the obligation for the producers to pay 2.5 of cash flows to municipalities, so to local people, let's say. And this contributed actually was critical to lower public resistance against installation of wind turbines. So we didn't have much problems with installations in Portugal. However, the sector faces a couple of challenges today. So with the financial crisis, there are some questions about the grants, and on the other hand, as more and more capacity is installed, the potential to install more capacity actually is smaller right now, and best sites are already tapped. So nowadays, the research in this area is shifting more for the offshore. Okay, this is just a representation of the formation of this innovation system based on technology, on wind technologies. So we see that we start from this legitimation means science and technology policies. So we start from policies to have resources in the 80s to do research, which increase knowledge and actually build some entrepreneurial experimentation, bringing more and more actors, which actually had positive externalities, namely the creation of this APREN, the association, which actually worked a lot in terms of advocacy, coalition, and to foster legitimation. And once the wind power became a real alternative, actually this legitimation worked to influence the direction of search, to bring more resources for the sector, which actually allowed the market formation, more knowledge, more applied knowledge was developed, and with the materialization of the production facilities being installed, actually fueled more market formation, and with the increase in terms of production, with the jobs and the exports, actually the public acceptance was also ameliorated in the middle. So, a couple of ideas for discussion. The development of wind power in Portugal actually confirms the special acceleration of the diffusion of energy technologies. So in this case, shows clearly that supply push and demand pull policies, I would say, coordinated and be effective to support development of a local technological innovation system, say also in following countries or forward countries. So in this case, science and technology policies worked as an initial motor to fulfill the critical functions, such as creation of knowledge. The formation of expectations were also important to attract key actors who actually were involved in some advocacy coalitions and allowed to generate more legitimacy for the technology. And finally, the tender-based feed-in scheme proved effective to foster, to spur partnerships between local companies and international manufacturers to transfer state-of-the-art technology. This is really one main point in all these presentations, that actually enhancing the absorptive capacity is critical to assimilate knowledge spillovers more rapidly in order to integrate them with global competencies. And this actually opened up one question, which actually is related with the framework that we are using. So how to integrate this fact in our framework of the functions is one of the main things that will be working in the future. We, as a team, me and Margarida. So finally, to conclude, public acceptance can be fostered with by sharing the benefits with the local community. However, there are some signs nowadays that actually compensation get higher because of the wind turbines installation, the environmental impacts, and also this problem with the tariff deficits. So this may affect the implementation of more capacity in the future or offshore projects. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering about the extremely aggressive feed-in tariff strategy that was laid out by the government, and to what extent was this supported by people? See, there was 1 year where there was no limitation on the number of years that they would support a fairly high feed-in tariff. That seems like crazy in comparison to what the rest of the EU has been doing.
That's a good question, and actually we are seeing now the reflex of the extremely aggressive, as you said, feed-in tariff, because we have now to face this huge tariff deficit. At that point, I would say that no one was expecting that the growth would be such large for wind, and once the wind growth was so big. And the problem with the financing and in financing the tariff deficit was raised. Actually, it was a bit late. And also, what happened was that there is something here that was not very clear in the regulatory process. And what was not clear, and you can't find anywhere in the literature, was that there were a couple of revisions of the feed-in tariff, which actually reduced the benefits and also limited in time the price of these benefits. But what was very important is much of the capacity had been already contracted. So nowadays what we see is, if we look at the regulation is okay, the price is fair, but most of the companies are just receiving the most attractive one. So this thing was not very publicized. It was not in the media, so people were not aware of that point. But it's extremely important. And nowadays, as you know, Portugal has some serious problems, and we have the IMF and the Troika. And one of the main concerns of Troika was to cut on the rents. And actually, it's very interesting because one of the agreements of the government set up an agreement with the producers to reduce the rents. But this agreement is so stupid that actually what made it was to enlarge the period that they can receive the rent. So it was really stupid. There are lots of struggles, of course, we are trying to, because it's around 1.5 billion euros per year, so it's a lot of rents generated. Thank you.
More questions? Well, I wouldn't agree with you that resistance is growing and that local benefits actually work. They work for the local authority, not for the populations. We are doing case studies in several locations that have wind farms, and local populations don't seem to even realize that there are economic benefits associated with the wind farm. The money goes into the local authority and they do whatever they want.
You are surviving which area?
We did a case study in NTNU, and now we're doing 2 others in Terras Altas de Faf and what's the other one? Serra da Feira.
Okay, I would suggest you to also survey people in the Beira Alta, because
we also did a case study in Sortelha, which is almost a criminal affair.
Sortelha, yeah, but I would also add to this.
We did an extensive analysis of environmental impact assessments and public participation and consultation, so we pretty much covered the whole country through that.
I would just add some areas with a very low density of population, and I would suggest in the Beira Alta and Lisboa. And actually, what can affect is that in some of those areas they don't have anything. So it's not like FAF, they have at least some industry around. In those areas they don't have anything, and this came and brought some money to the community, but that's okay. I know that in some areas, in lots of areas, it happens such like ISCTE.
No more questions? So we can move on to Beatrice.
So I'm going to present about my PhD work, finishing right now. So my research was focusing on the emergence of photovoltaic in France, especially on the role of feed-in tariffs in this emergence. In my presentation, I'm really going to study and look at feed-in tariffs and their effect on photovoltaic markets and also on the way they were designed. So to begin with, I'm going to give a little context on the development of photovoltaic. So, as this graph shows, photovoltaic is fairly recent. It's really developed extremely fast in the past 5 to 6 years. So it's been a really dramatic evolution that was mostly driven by political support, especially in Europe, with support for generation, and China was more support for manufacture, but the combination of the two led to boom in recent years. And this enthusiasm was, however, slightly reduced in the last couple of years, as you probably all have heard of, a lot of photovoltaic companies going bankrupt in Germany and China. And so it's a kind of a strange paradoxical pitch for an evolution. That's my starting point. To look at photovoltaic over the last decade, it started as something that was promising but utopian, really very far from being here, as you can see in 2000 there was almost nothing in the world. And in the late 2000s, it was really booming. It was the next big thing, and everybody had to wanted to invest in that. And today it's more problematic and chaotic and sudden. So it's really a situation of dramatic and brutal shifts in evolution. And my initial puzzle was what can explain this brutal and to an extent dramatic changes. And starting from the observation that photovoltaic markets have been driven by policy support, I wonder what could be learned about photovoltaic development from the study of support instruments. I chose to focus on feed-in tariff because there were the instruments used in France. My main case study was France, but also they are the most popular and most widely used instruments in Europe, and they also are the one with the most impressive direct effects. Well, feed-in tariffs were photovoltaic boomed in a few years. So how does a feed-in tariff work? So feed-in tariff is a category of instruments, and there are various designs, but the raw features are usually the same. So you have an emerging renewable energy technology that is not ready to go on the market by itself yet, and you want to accelerate its development. So you're going to do that by facilitating investment, and to facilitate investment you give three types of guarantee. The first guarantee is a guarantee for producers that the electricity generated from renewable sources is going to be bought, so it's a purchase agreement. The second guarantee is that it's going to be bought at a fixed price that you know in advance. And the third guarantee is that this is going to happen for a fixed period of time, usually 15 to 20 years, so you can plan out your investment with maximal security. And all of this is usually paid for by electricity users, by electricity design and financing. That's usually a collective effort to support emerging technology. So it seems pretty neat and simple like this, but the fact is that it actually was more complicated than that in practice. And there's a quote from one of my interviewees that I really like. He's talking about the debates around support for renewable energy, and especially debate what is better, the feed-in tariff or self-heating system, so price-driven system or quantity-driven system. And it's starting from the economic theory, saying the theory was an extremely simple problem of economic theory with an extremely limited number of solutions. Then we kept refining it and turning it through screws so as to get something that combined too many objectives. So we kind of tinkering with the instrument to experiment with its unexpected effect. And also it took place in a great mess because of the problems that were on one side it was too expensive, especially financial crisis, and on the other hand there were trouble developing several sectors in a regular manner. So you can see all the complexity of this instrument, that's a mix of economic theory and the messiness of political processes and experimental policy making with a new technology that's not very well known. From this viewpoint, from trying to understand feed-in tariffs from this perspective of how it turned out to be such a more complex thing than expected, I'm going to first give a brief account of the history of feed-in tariffs, especially at the European level. It's going to be really rough sketch because I don't have much time. And then I focus on the French cases and on the reforms of feed-in tariffs. Feed-in tariffs emerged for the first time in the US in 1978. So that's the first occurrence. In Europe, it started in 1980s with Denmark and Germany when we started developing wind power. And there are two signed voluntary agreements between electric utilities and wind power producers to accommodate for the new source of electricity. And the agreement stated that wind power had to be purchased at a percentage of retail price, so a percentage of the price paid by end users. It was a guaranteed price system that was connected to actually the electricity market. This was institutionalized in Germany for the first time in 1990 with the German feed-in law, so straight law that made feed-in tariffs a regulatory instrument. And Denmark followed a couple of years later with Well, and this was the same system of wind power and renewable energy in general. These purchases are a percentage of retail price. And a few years after that, at the European Union level, there were discussions both on the internal market, the directive was adopted in 1996, and on renewable energy sources. So the development of European energy policy and renewable energy policy with this idea of making and integrating European electricity market, if that makes. And in that process, categories of instruments, especially stabilized and generalized. So there's quite a big change in the following decade, with Germany still being the leader with the renewable energy loan pattern. So this renewable energy law really modified FITs in depth because it first disconnected them from the market. Data had corresponding to fixed prices that were not connected at all to electricity market prices and that were technology dependent to try to take into account specificities of renewable energy technology. We had a phenotype for wind, a phenotype for solar, etc. And 1 year later, another very important development was a ruling from the European Court that stated that phenotypes did not need to be state aid, so they were compatible with the market doctrine. Well, doctrines might be a strong word, but the market bias at the European level. So in this context, there was a very important development in the renewable energy policy, several directives over the decade, and the setting of more and more binding objectives for member states. And this led to the further transposition of EU directive in member states that the experimentation with wide ranges of instruments, and a lot of countries that did that. But it's also led to the development of an increasing body of expertise on support for renewable energy sources. And this body of expertise also fed academic research, especially in economics and public policy. And this research contributed to stabilize categories of instruments, especially during debates about the best instrument to support renewable energy and the feed-in tariff versus tradable certificate debate that really stabilized these two categories as distinct and to an extent competing forms of support. But then this policy development had effect on markets, and photovoltaic especially started to develop as like a real living market with unexpected consequences. And this fed back on the design of instruments. As usual, Germany is the country where things happen first, because in Germany it started before, so they are kind of pioneers. In 2008, at the time when global PV module prices collapsed, a revolution renewable energy law and feed-in tariffs aimed at channeling growth in photovoltaic installations items at making feed-in tariffs dynamic and decreasing to take into account learning effects. And there were similar reforms of feed-in tariffs throughout Europe, in Spain, Czech Republic, France, in the UK, pretty much in all countries that had chosen feed-in tariffs. And what we notice is actually a sophistication and hybridization of instruments. So we no longer have this, either you have a price instrument, you don't know the quantity, you have a quantity instrument, you don't know the price. But adapts trying to take the both to make the best of both worlds and try to find a compromise between those two theoretically very distinct ways. So what I find from this quick history is that feedback is actually quite complex objects that can be seen as both market devices and political instruments. And I'm using the market decision framework developed by Kabisky and Caron and all the literature on the STS and NTNU literature on market formations. And what we stress is that market framings rely on three types of things. On the one hand, institutional arrangements, theories of the economies and also things value. And in the case of feed-in tariffs, you can really see those three interacting branches. First, institutional arrangements are needed, administrative procedures, design and purchase obligations, mechanism to compensate for both renewable energy targets to set an objective, etc. You also need theory of the economy or innovation studies that say if you develop capacity, you're going to decrease costs and you're going to speed up the development of technology, all the trajectory economics notions, and the way to measure cost effectiveness and efficiency, evaluation of risk, perception, a lot of modeling is used in scenarios, and last but not least, things valued come into play. Renewable electricity and its characteristics. We have to accommodate it to the grid, problem with grid connections, resources and potential, but also, maybe most importantly, renewable energy technology. In the case of photovoltaic, the dynamic of technology production was really important in the way feed-in tariffs had to be reformed. So, to give a more precise illustration of this, I'm going to now focus on the French case. So, French pretty much follow this European chronology. First interest for feed-in tariffs was expressed in the 1990s, but they were not adopted, and the choice for a tariff scheme evolved in the same tariffs. Rather widely considered a failure. Feed-in tariffs came back on the agenda in 2000 with a law that transposed the internal market directive and introduced the possibility to use purchase obligation and feed-in tariffs for renewable energy. For photovoltaic, the first feed-in tariffs was set in 2002, and they were then later modified in 2006. Design next slide. And not much happened at that point. It was a rather marginal policy until the late 2000s, where there was a strong political push for renewable energy, both at the European level, energy climate package, and at the national level, with the gouvernement kind of green boom in policy making. Around the same time, photovoltaic started developing more widely because of the collapse in prices, and this led to a situation in 2010 when the market was really out of control, and there were lots of reforms to try to put it back on track. And so a lot of tinkering with feed-in tariffs to try to put them back in line. And this ended up with a moratorium in late 2010. Moratorium on feed-in tariffs, because no other way seemed to be able to stop the climate increase. That was starting to cost a lot. And the moratorium was followed by a consultation of stakeholders trying to design a new support system, and that was released in March 2011. And since then, things have been kind of wavering with a really uncertain damaged market, and control emergency measures to try to give it, boost it a little. So to look back on the design of feed-in tariffs. So initially, in 2002, what do you have? You have a system that's really inspired from the Gen 1, except that it's much lower in terms of incentive. So the maximum level of feed-in tariffs is 15 cents per kilowatt. This is really not much compared to PV price advertising. And there are two categories, well, difference between main and local cities, because it's sunshine pollution different, and categories between distinguished according to installation capacity and type technology. So if you for certain type of technology, you're going to subsidize and the tariff is set to decrease by 5% every year to account innovation and impact, but it's too low, so it's not enough to guarantee that it has real effect on installed capacity. Then in 2006, there's a change that's quite important in the design. First, the level is doubled, so it's 30% per kilowatt, and they are building integrated photovoltaic premium. So if your photovoltaic panel is well integrated into your building and the roof, you have a higher tariff, but there's there's no clear definition of what building integrated photovoltaic means. So basically, it's if you say you are building integrated, you get the premium, and that's a really a one-size-fits-all policy. That's not set to decrease, but instead it index to inflation. So it's a very static region of feed-in tariff that says, well, it's marginal anyway, so we're going to give an interesting incentive so that we have a little photovoltaic, but we don't have to care too much of that. It's not going to have too much effect. But it's really not what's going to happen. In fact, there's, as time goes, there's a rising discrepancy between feed-in tariff level and installation costs, which leads to rapid increase in projects and difficult control over building integrated photovoltaics. And in fact, it leads to the constitution of a very, very heterogeneous group of photovoltaic investors and developers that's going to be hard to gather and try to have a good image of. This overflowing leads to a series of reform, which is kind of complicated because it's complicated. So you have in yellow the scheme between 2006 and 2009 that's the increase from inflation, and then in 2010 you have two reforms that are trying to control growth by dividing it into several categories so that you can target specific categories that you want to keep supporting, and other categories that you want to support that. So you can see that for example, in residential building integrated photovoltaic, it's not really decreasing, but in very large installation, it's decreasing a lot. No, not in very large installation, but in simplified building integrated photovoltaics, which is a category that's still not very well defined. It's decreasing quite a lot. And then you have a second attempt at targeting decrease later in the year. Both don't really lead to don't have coming on the market because they were announced too early on, so that people had time to rush and expect it before the reform actually enforced. So this leads to a moratorium because you can't go on inventing new categories and decreasing them kind of arbitrarily forever. And the outcome of the moratorium was a very complicated subsidy scheme. On the one hand, form of self-adjusting feed-in tariffs, but still have a lot of categories which specific feed-in tariffs, and for each category, the level of this tariff is decreasing according to the amount of registered project within 3 months. So basically, the most projects you have for one specific category of installation, the steeper the decrease. It goes very fast because every 3 months you hardly have the time to check what the tariff is and develop a project and it's already changed. And for bigger projects, all those that have 120, it's really nothing, they cannot support a project at this point. You have calls for tenders, so we move back to volume regulation. With two categories, to go into details, but one for smaller installations, one for really big solar plants. So from this study of this design, you can see 3 strategies emerging to try to reframe the market. The first one is, for the most obvious, the creation of new categories and refinements, try to turn innovation and shape the technologies you want to see developed. So supporting executive differentiating according to installation types and sizes to try to choose where we want people to be. So the case of France on houses and small capacity. Second trend is the sophistication of mechanisms, trying to make feed-in tariffs smarter and make them able to take into account more and more information in the situation of the market, both domestic and global. So yeah, regional coefficients are set to take into account different resources in sunshine. You have the automatic decrease that's set to take into account the various development pace in several sectors, development types of photovoltaic modules. And then you have the bonus for EU manufactured photovoltaic systems that was added, I think, last year or maybe 2 years ago. Try to take into account the global dynamic of the PV module market. And the last and third strategy was atoms of political management, so the emergency reform, for example, in 2010, or the consultation that was studied in another part of my PhD, try to reach a compromise that actually failed, and emergency measures that are taken were not, because the automatic feed-in tariffs doesn't really work properly, so you have to sometimes go back into political management to try to save the market. So, as a conclusion, 3 main points I would like to stress for discussion. First, it seems to me that feed-in tariffs were elaborated and stabilized and transformed through the interactions of energy policies and policy processes, economic theories and technology developments, so the integration of expertise, policy and technologies. Photovoltaic markets depend on feed-in tariffs, but they also disrupt feed-in tariffs. Interesting co-dependency between the policy and the technology it's following. And last, various reframing strategies have been used to deal with photovoltaic markets over the years, and they mostly have relied on testing and modification of small instrument designs. Feed-in tariffs is really getting crucial in management of photovoltaic. Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead.
I have one. I think this is also very interesting to add the evolution of costs of the modules, right? And apparently there was a huge reduction last year, and there are some reports saying that the cost per kilowatt is around 500 euros kilowatt. So probably anyway, with or without feed-in tariff, and this is my question. But I think anyway, even without this system in the future, EV is going to grow in France. What do you think?
What's interesting when you look at debates on photovoltaic sports, they usually say it's going to develop anyway. We just want it to happen faster in our countries that we can be the leader of this market, and we're not lagging behind to deal with going forward, for instance. And there's also this narrative of building your own industry in France. That's quite important. I think it's dead now, more or less, because the industry is in such a state that it would be hard to replicate the image, but
more questions?
Thank you. It was very interesting. I don't know if you understand my questions. I'm sorry if it's strange, but you said that you're talking about economic theory of how this was kind of affecting. That's very interesting to me. Is it? I just want to know. When you say that it's the idea of how surplus value is produced, is that kind of the changing theoretical thing, or is it that the economics distribution of value that was changing this the procedure or calculation, or the kind of distribution of value? What is the economic aspects?
What's changing is the way economic theory of the way instruments should work evolved according to the evolution of objectives. You have, I'd say, 4 trends of economic, like that are very economic on types. There's one on innovation that's really focused on learning curves and learning by doing and how support is going to increase innovation. There's another trend that's innovated from environmental economics that's more focusing on the efficiency of support instruments to to lead to a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, and also all the notion of cost efficiency and effectiveness, how and all the price and quantity debate, I think, can be traced back to that trend, that's strand of economic theory. Then you have all the theories on investors and how to build a safe environment for investor and stability. I think I said 4, but I only 3 back. And it's kind of the interplay of the 3 trends that constituting clean tariffs, and it's interesting to see how at some point you are going to have one way more than the other. Literature on investor security has been developing later on and has taken more importance lately as investor security was challenged by regulatory evolutions. It's kind of hard to disentangle actually when you look at clean tariffs. Quite simple instrument, but there's so much heterogeneity, even just in the theories behind it.
Thanks. I'm just wondering how embedded these very complex strategies that we've been laid out now have become to the industry and to people who wish to take up EV. Is it now that is a very strong lobby to keep this very complex system going? Or have they found it difficult to continue some of these reforms?
Can I add to your question? Is France using EV models?
France still producing EV models. I think a little, but France has never produced a lot. There was a firm that was producing some own supply chain, and they went bankrupt or bought by Vidal. I don't think they never produced a lot of money anyway, so it's marginal. And in terms of in France, the industry and the lobbying structures is quite interesting, because when the green price was high, everybody could go and did not try to build transparency and organize. So when you get more attention, they'll disorganize and they don't even know who else is at the table, even the big representative of the renewable energy industry don't know everyone. And the world kind of forces all these very different people to get together and talk and try to get to know each other, so it helped structure the industry. At the same time, it really killed off a lot of businesses, so the industry is more organized now, and they kind of have a more, not very strongly power anyway in France, but they are better at lobbying, but at the same time they're weakened because a lot of businesses are just almost dead now, playing dead. So it's kind of a complicated situation where they could theoretically have the power to test reforms, but they're not really weighing much in that in the balance.
So are you saying that there's a significant pressure to keep the current structure in place?
There's pressure. I think last week we released a public letter, an open letter to say, please give us more incentives. We're not dying. Regularly so, but it's still not very important in the French energy debate. So things probably very different if you look at Germany or Portugal.
Yeah, because in Germany they tried to kill it off and basically it's impossible.
But it goes further than the mere PV sectors about the whole energy situation. Probably impossible allocating this.
No more questions? Well, in that case, thank you very much.